the Gospel of Luke, beginning with chapter 24. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. And while they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him and said, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" And he asked them, "What things?" And they replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. And how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some of the women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning. And when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen that vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. And as they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." And so he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread.
More than likely, all of us have a road story. Some story of when we were traveling and something happened, whether it was good or bad or difficult. We probably all have a road story. Maybe we have several road stories talking about all types of incidents. I know I've got at least a dozen, if not more. Lots of road stories. Well, here's a great road story. Two guys were on their way to Emmaus, and Jesus showed up. The difficulty I have to ask myself, and I'd invite you to ponder this, in our road stories, or when we're traveling, and all of life is a journey, how often are we aware God is with us? That the risen one, the crucified one, whom God raised from the dead, is with us? And how often do we find ourselves really listening carefully when we encounter Jesus on the road? Road stories. One time I was a preacher at Douglas and Rock, not the intersection, little Townsend. You have to be close to Wichita for that to fly, okay? But these little towns over here. I traveled back and forth. The parsonage was in Douglas, and I'd drive to Rock. And one night, I was driving to Rock for the monthly covered dish dinner at Rock. Now, I was running a little late. As I told Bobby Reed on the way to church this morning, when I was coming in late, late's my middle name. It was a covered dish dinner Sharon had made. I told the story earlier, and I said it was scalloped potatoes and ham. I think that was the other incident. I think this time it was a chicken and rice casserole. Great big one. I had it on the floor of the car. I was going by myself. I think the dinner started at 6 and I left Douglas at 6:01. Now this is back in the ancient days when the speed limit was 65, where 65. 65. Yeah, that's probably what I was driving. 55. Anywhere he went. Well, I might have been exceeding the speed limit a little bit. I was late. I had this notion that if you're going to go to a covered dish dinner with a chicken and rice casserole, it's always a good idea to get there before dessert. As I was driving along, if you know anything about that little road, I just hit the county line, and all of a sudden I see a red light going off my rearview mirror. And I thought, I wonder who he's after. Unfortunately, I was the only vehicle on the road. I pulled over, state trooper. State trooper comes up, Smokey the Bear hat comes up, I roll down my window, I see your driver's license, hand him my driver's license. He said, Mr. Martin, you know how fast you were going? Not really. I don't know how fast I was going. Let's say 65. Let's say 70. He said, you were going 70 and 55 mile an hour zone. Where are you off to in such a hurry anyway? I said, I'm going to church dinner, see? And I pointed at this great big chicken and rice casserole on the floor. He said, oh. He said, what time was the dinner? And I said, 6. I think you're going to be late. I said, yeah, that's why I was going fast. And he said, this is a true story, people. He said, well, at least you're not the pastor. And I said, yes, I am. And he did what Bibi did. He doubled over in laughter. And I thought, yes! I made this guy laugh. Best laugh he's probably had in 10 years. I'm off scot-free. So he goes back to his vehicle, comes back up, and gives me a ticket. And says, have a nice day, Reverend Martin. Oh. So I tell that story, but have I really learned anything? Did I encounter Jesus in that incident? I mean, obviously, I still don't feel terribly guilty for going too fast. I was breaking the speed limit big time. But there's even more. Why was I late? I imagine, knowing me, I really didn't have a very good reason to be so late. And even if I was late, what made me think that by driving too fast, I would get there more than maybe 10 seconds earlier than I would have otherwise? And as somebody said, you don't know, John, he might have saved your life. So I tend to look at it and say, well, did I really learn anything? Well, obviously I did when I was pastor in Sterling. Somehow, when I was driving back and forth to WSU to take classes, I seemed to get a lot of tickets there too. So I call my friend and say, hey, so-and-so, I got another ticket. And he said, okay, I'll take care of it. Not that I didn't have to pay the ticket, but it didn't go against my license, you know. So the last time that happened, he said, "Okay, Martin, no more tickets in Reno County. I've used up all my favors." So. I tend not to speed too much anymore. Okay. If I'm on the turnpike, I drive 79. All right? I don't know. It just feels like I'm going to get there faster. Every once in a while, I drive the speed limit, and I think, oh, this is kind of cool. It worked pretty well this way. Are you getting the picture? Have I learned anything?
No.
It seems like a pretty obvious no. So we have two guys, apparently two observant Jews. More than likely, they were returning back to Emmaus from Jerusalem, where they'd been for the Passover celebration. And they were on their way back, and they weren't very happy. In fact, they were quite discouraged. They were probably depressed, dejected. If they'd have had a can, they'd have probably been kicking that can down the road, trading off, talking to each other. Probably wasn't a very lively conversation. Not a whole lot to say when everything that you expected to happen, everything you hoped to happen, everything that you imagined was going to happen, didn't work out that way at all. And as they were walking down the road, a stranger appeared, the crucified one whom God had raised from the dead, but somehow they didn't recognize him. And he said, "What are you discussing along the way?" They stopped and looked at this stranger. "What in the world are you talking about? What do you think we're talking about? Are you coming from Jerusalem? You don't know what happened?" They said, "The one we were so excited about, who was obviously a prophet of God, who was obviously filled with God's Spirit, the one we thought was going to redeem Israel, those religious authorities and leaders, those folks murdered him." Well, 3 days after it's happened, and we remember he said something about on the third day, but here we are, taking our can, walking back to Emmaus. Oh, some women went to the tomb and found it empty and said they had a vision of angels. Some of the other men went to the tomb, it was empty, but they didn't see anything. We don't know what they thought was going to happen. But they must have been relatively religious. They'd been to celebrate the Passover. They understood that Jesus was a prophet, so they had some sense of understanding of the way God worked. Maybe they thought that by redeeming, saving Israel, that this one whom they were following was going to straighten everything out. Maybe they thought, oh, well, he'll make Israel the true people of God. Get rid of those Roman people. Get rid of all those foreigners and make us the real nation of God. And we can be in charge. But instead of redeeming Israel, all those religious leaders and authorities, those people, they murdered him. That's it. A couple of fanciful stories out there, but so don't know who you are, stranger, but you're welcome to kick the can with us as we go on down the road. And the stranger, Jesus, said to them, "Oh, you foolish, foolish people, so slow of heart to understand? Was it not necessary that the Messiah, that God's chosen one, have these things happen to him before he went into his glory? And then stranger Jesus began to explain to them what we call our Old Testament. We don't know what books they were, but Moses, the writings of Moses and the prophet, explaining how God works. As they got to their place, stranger Jesus made as if he was going to go on, and they said, "Hey, stay with us. It's almost dark. Stay." According to custom, he had to act like he was going on because you don't just assume you're going to get invited to stay. And so they probably said, "Stay with us." No, I can't. Stay with us. No, I can't. Stay with us. Third time. Okay. And then, as they were sitting down to eat, he took the bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them. And in that moment, they recognized that the crucified one had been raised from the dead and was with them. But then suddenly he was gone. They said, "We got to go." They went back to Jerusalem that very night. When they walked in where the others were gathered, the others said, "The Lord has been raised. He appeared to Peter." And then they shared their story, their encounter of Jesus on the road. They had quite a road story. I don't know about yours, but that was a powerful road story. And what we like about it is, and surely you're thinking, "Well, John, we should have had communion today, next Sunday." Well, we should have had it today because this is recognizing that Jesus is with us when we break the bread and take the cup, indeed. But the real power of this story, is that they finally listened carefully and totally rethought how they understood God in their lives and in our world. Was it not necessary that Jesus, God with us, the Son of God, was it not necessary that God become the victim? Because that's where God is. God is willing to offer God's self, be killed, and not retaliate, but forgive and bless and offer life. Was it not necessary that God become victim? You can understand this text in lots of different ways, but they said, "Were our hearts not burning within us?" Maybe they begin to rethink who God is and how God works, and realized that finger-pointing business that we're so good at has nothing to do with God. Oh, we know all about that finger-pointing business. You can go to the 3rd chapter of all of our Bibles. It's called Genesis chapter 3. And Adam and Eve ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And God says, "How'd you know you were naked?" And Adam says, "Oh, well, she gave me the fruit to eat." And he goes to Eve, "Well, why'd you eat that?" "Oh, the snake made me." Boy, we're good at that pointing. I don't know about you, but I can point. Yes. What were these guys on the road doing? It wasn't us. Those religious authorities and the leaders, they killed Jesus. maybe they suddenly listened carefully and their eyes were open and they began to realize that if they would have listened carefully earlier, they would have understood what God is about in offering God's self. Who knows? Maybe they wouldn't have run away. Maybe they would have been with Jesus. Sometimes it happens that people understand. I've told the story of Bishop Oscar Romero before. Oscar Romero became Archbishop in El Salvador. He was elected bishop because everybody thought, oh, if he's just a calm, mild-mannered guy, he won't shake anything up at all. He's safe. And he was. Until he made some road trips. When he made road trips and went from where he was ensconced as bishop out into the villages to meet with the peasants, the common people of El Salvador. And when he began to hear their stories of being oppressed by the government, the military, and others who were in power, when he began to hear their stories, his heart burned within him and his eyes were open and he began to speak out on behalf of the abused, the hurting, the victims, the least of these, the hungry, the homeless, those in prison. And he began to speak with a powerful voice, saying, this is not correct. To mistreat anybody, let alone these people, without any rules. Bishop Romero, on a Sunday morning, was taking the bread. He blessed it. He broke it, ready to offer it to the people. And a shot rang out, and he was assassinated at the table. He understood who God is. God is with the victim. God is the victim. Listen carefully, John. All those notions of God that you think you have figured out, maybe you need to rethink. Maybe you need to allow the crucified one who walks with you to help you understand more than you think you do. That God is here, no matter what. And especially, God is here in the midst of the pain. Listen carefully. Listen.